I'm Muchnik. I'm with Launch Legal and Jason Weiner PC. This is my colleague, Jackie Radebaugh. And we're here to talk about using the Colorado LCA statutes to kind of wrap your DAO into.
Yeah. If you want to move, thank you. I don't know how to do this. I'm an associate attorney with Jason Weiner PC. We are based in Colorado. Most of our attorneys are kind of off-site, and we've been collaborating with Yav on an off-council base and me since last summer on Web3 projects and with DAO clients who decided that cooperative might be a good fit, and it turns out my firm is specialized in cooperative law. So we thought, why not? Let's give it a try. And that's kind of how I got involved in 3F mostly.
Yeah, we actually formed the first DAO co-op back in 2019. We didn't actually call it a DAO co-op then. It was just an LCA. And it's the Employment Commons LCA, which is based here and is part of the DAODenver affiliated group of companies, I guess.
Okay. So
DAOs.
We figured you all know about DAOs really well. So we're going to talk a little bit about cooperatives, tell you why we think they might be a good match or have synchrony between those two models. And before we get to that, and we have about 10-12 minutes, so we're going to go quickly. Essentially, disclaimer, we're attorneys, don't rely on what we're saying to do your own thing. Talk to an attorney. We're not your attorneys, and we could. But as of now, we're not. Don't take that as an offense.
Some of these people, and
some of you actually are our clients. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, really we're here, as we said, just to understand why cooperative structures are, we believe them to be a really solid framework and definitely should be part of your consideration in terms of the current legal entities that exist. Co-ops are not perfect for DAOs. We don't think any entities is kind of the perfect fit. But I think at least from a policy and legislative front, we're all working towards that end. But yeah, so we're going to talk about how co-ops and DAOs overlap.
Yeah, and then why Colorado? There are LCAs in several other states, so why Colorado? We'll touch on that a little bit. Next, please. So what are cooperatives? It depends on who you're talking with. Cooperatives can be just statutory business entities. They are a form of governing a business. You govern on a cooperative basis, and tax law actually define what that is. It can be a set of basic principles. So the two most known ones are the Rochdale Principle and the set of 7 principles that come from a labor movement in England in the 1800s, and the Mondragon Principles that come from the Mondragon cooperatives and an actual priest that got into the cooperative movement in Spain and is still really surviving really well. And the whole economy in this city works on a cooperative basis. That's this whole big thing. And then as far as statutory business entity goes, it can be a cooperative corporation. That's a legal business type. And in Colorado, Article 55 cooperatives, 56 and 56 are the cooperative corporations. Just anybody on a cooperative basis can use that statute. And Article 58, that's the limited cooperative associations. That's the statute that we are using to incorporate DAOs that engage in patronage activity. And we'll touch a tiny bit on that next, please. So I just highlighted the 7 cooperative principles, and part of why we think the cooperative movement and the cooperative type of entities and DAOs overlap are because of those principles. Cooperatives operate on with themselves among cooperative entities. They focus on member participation and economic benefit. So the goal there is not to make money for outside investors that are just pure putting money in and waiting for an extractive return, and it's not to make profits or returns to the entity itself, but really to the members, to the participants, those that are providing value to the entity. So those are some of those principles. Cooperative has this kind of elements that are very relevant to the design and when we're looking into the overlapping between those entities. Typically, cooperatives adopt one member, one vote. Limited cooperative associations can vary that, so we can say that is based on your patronage. How much you use, how much you engage with the entity can be relevant to the amount of voting power that you have. So kind of maybe looking like quadratic voting, for instance. So business carried for the mutual benefit of the members is a very important factor or designing element of the cooperative. Cooperatives can be membership entities that don't have stock, or they can be stock corporations. So if you're looking into having investors and preferred shares, it's a good chance that your cooperative would be a stock corporation or a stock association. Otherwise, a membership entity might be a good way to go. They provide limited liability to the members. So in contrast to limited cooperative, limited liability companies that have varying degrees of liability protection for the members and other partnership models. Here it looks more like a corporation in that sense. I probably should take a step back on that, but it's too much detail. And membership stock is exempt from securities for the members, and then specifically in Colorado, there's exemption also for investors that are based within the state. So those are kind of important factors for.
And I mean, those are pretty big points, right? So as far as the securities exemption, I think that's what a lot of DAOs are looking for with their token issuances. So yeah, if you form your LCA in Colorado, you get that built-in securities exemption for membership, and then on the investor class as well.
I did make a decision this week that to let people know that if you're going to look for the cooperative model and the limited cooperative association to avoid securities regulation, that's not the model. Are there exemptions? Yes. Are there ways of, I guess, going around to a sense? Yes, depending on who are your member, your classes, and how you're using your tokens. But if your goal is just to avoid securities exemption or securities regulation, that's not the model for it. The consideration will still be the same as you would for other entities. Next, please.
Yeah, so when we've been working with co-ops in designing DAO co-ops from scratch, we really look at kind of the membership base, the contributors, whether patronage is an attractive feature. Usually it is. That's why people choose to go with the LCA. How, if you're tokenizing patronage, how that kind of calculation and unit of account will be structured. And then also just the flow of funds and income into the entity itself. So typically cooperatives aren't ideal for kind of pooled investment vehicles, but you can set up an LCA as an investment club as well. So yeah, so we're looking at activity, the membership base, the number of classes, and then any kind of ancillary or kind of related entities that would be formed around the LCA as well. So whether just for kind of treasury purposes or holding IP or even having governance itself maybe kind of unwrapped without any kind of legal structure.
And then I mentioned patronage, and that's one of the important aspects of DAO co-op design. My understanding is that in DAOs, patronage is generally defined as kind of like you're a patron to this entity or to this group, to this collective, or you contribute to it, you're patronizing it, and generally is a good definition. I'm sure they're better. As far as cooperatives go, though, this applies, and it also relates to how the entity produces revenue. So I can, if my interaction with the entity, my use of the goods or services, or my provision of goods or services to the entity, to this group, generates revenue. That revenue at the end, or the profits from that, can be distributed to me as a patron based on my patronage, because that it's connected. There's a whole line of connection in between activity, the entity's revenue stream, and the profit distribution. If that entity is just selling real estate and has capital gains, the capital gains is not related to my activity in the entity, and that's not considered revenue generated by patronage activities, and therefore not distributed to members. And that's kind of a difference that has very important tax implications for cooperatives. So when we're working with DAO groups, we both spend quite a bit of time trying to define how do you define your members in terms of the interactions between what are they producing? So their interactions with your entity, is that going to produce revenue, and you want to distribute profits? How are those connected? So like it's really an important aspect that I cannot stress enough. Next, please. Gonna talk about
that? Yeah, I mean, so this is just some statistics with the number of DAO co-ops that we've worked with here and the number that are in the pipeline. So we've got 25 in the pipeline. We've received a lot of really solid feedback from the community at large. Also hoping to work with Cali DAO as well to create some templates for structuring some kind of basic version 1 LCAs here in Colorado. But it's I don't know, and the DAOs that we work with seem to have been able to layer that kind of that Web3 tooling and are sort of seamlessly, swimming along and fairly satisfied with the structure as well.
Right. So what we do when we work with a DAO group seeking to incorporate or form as a DAO co-op, we work with them through the design process. We work with them on checklists and defining some of those design aspects at length. We look at business plans if folks have it, not necessary. We try to really understand how the revenue generation in the process, and then kind of look at the white paper for that aspect and for the relationship in between the entity and its members. And then we draft articles of organization, bylaws, and the bylaws are a sort of version of your constitution. If you have one, we try not to have both, but your constitution can be the public document that is, a summary of those, and then we use that as a guideline if that's available, but not necessary, to draft bylaws and incorporate some of the legal requirements, and then also how you operate. So sometimes we would just add streamlined standard provisions to help facilitate what your work is. But if you have kept track of how you interact, how you vote, how your decision-making process is, your conflict resolution takes place, we really try to incorporate those in the documents to prevent, any conflicts or any default applications from what is in the law. So you might end up with a document that's fairly lengthy. We just don't want to have standard provisions from the law applying to you, but we also want to be respectful of how you operate. So I think that's most of it for us today. And a lot of our clients are around, so ask them about that work, how it works for them. It's brand new. Cooperatives have been around for hundreds of years. DAO co-ops are just building on that process. So give us feedback, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.